There is something about Pennsylvania in the 1980s that stays with people who lived through it. The steel mills going quiet, the Friday night football games under the lights, the corner stores and the row homes. If someone grew up then, they know exactly what made that decade so unforgettable. This was a time when Pennsylvania was transforming. The steel industry that had built cities like Pittsburgh and Bethlehem was collapsing. Philadelphia was gritty and proud, celebrating championship sports teams while struggling with urban decay. The Amish country remained timeless while the rest of the state faced an uncertain future. This was the decade that gave us the Phillies' first World Series, the 76ers' dominance, Hall and Oates on the radio, and communities that pulled together even as the factories closed. The old Pennsylvania was fading, but something new was being born. Living in Pennsylvania meant navigating economic upheaval while holding on to traditions that defined generations. Let's walk through what daily life actually felt like during that turbulent decade. Some of this might bring back memories. Some of it reveals how much the Keystone State has changed. Let's step into that world. Homes in Pennsylvania in the 1980s reflected the state's working-class identity. In Philadelphia and its surrounding suburbs, row homes dominated entire neighborhoods. These narrow brick houses shared walls with neighbors on both sides. Front stoops were where people gathered on summer evenings, watching kids play in the street and catching up with neighbors. The row home stoop was a social institution. Inside these homes, the aesthetic was practical. Earth tones dominated. Brown and beige furniture, wood paneling in finished basements, and wallpaper with busy patterns. Shag carpet was giving way to shorter pile, but the colors remained muted. Many homes had plastic covers on the good furniture in the living room, save for company that rarely came. Pittsburgh homes were often built into hillsides, reflecting the city's dramatic terrain. Houses stacked up the slopes with steep staircases leading to front doors. The architecture was solid, built by immigrants who worked in the mills and wanted homes that would last. In the coal regions of northeastern Pennsylvania, company towns still showed their origins. Rows of nearly identical houses built by mining companies decades earlier lined the streets. These communities were tight-knit, bound together by shared heritage and shared struggles. Central Pennsylvania was different. Farmhouses dotted the landscape. The Pennsylvania Dutch influence meant well-maintained properties with large barns. Some communities still had no electricity by choice. Seeing a horse and buggy on the road was ordinary, not a tourist attraction. The television set was the center of entertainment in most Pennsylvania homes. Cable was spreading through the suburbs, bringing MTV into living rooms and changing how teenagers consume music. The VCR was becoming standard. Video rental stores appeared in strip malls across the state. Friday nights meant driving to the video store, browsing the shelves, and hoping the movie you wanted was not already rented. The economy hit Pennsylvania harder than almost anywhere else in America during the 1980s. The steel industry, which had defined the state's identity for generations, was collapsing. Bethlehem Steel, U.S. Steel, and dozens of smaller operations were laying off thousands. Communities that had been built around the mills faced devastation. In Pittsburgh, the unemployment rate reached over 17% in 1983. Young people who had expected to follow their fathers and grandfathers into the mills found those jobs simply gone. The certainty of a good union job with benefits and a pension evaporated. Families that had lived comfortably found themselves struggling. The coal regions of northeastern Pennsylvania faced similar decline. Mines that had operated for a century were closing. Towns like Scranton and Wilkes-Barre, already struggling, lost more jobs. The anthracite coal that had heated American homes was no longer needed, but Pennsylvania adapted. Pittsburgh began its transformation from Steel City to a center of education and healthcare. The universities and hospitals that had always been present became the new economic engines. The Rust Belt was becoming something else, though the transition was painful. Philadelphia's economy was more diversified, but the city still struggled. North Philadelphia and other neighborhoods faced poverty and crime. The contrast between the struggling city and the prospering suburbs grew sharper. White flight had already happened, and the city was left with a shrinking tax base. Before we continue with the culture and daily life that defined Pennsylvania in this era, if you are enjoying this look back at how people really lived and want to explore more decades and places, consider subscribing. There are so many more stories about how Americans built the life we know today. Sports in Pennsylvania in the 1980s were a source of fierce pride. Philadelphia started the decade with a bang. The Phillies won the World Series in 1980, their first championship ever. Mike Schmidt, Steve Carlton, and Pete Rose led a team that finally broke through. The parade down Broad Street drew more than 1 million people. Then in 1983, the 76ers, led by Julius Erving, Moses Malone, and Andrew Toney, swept the Lakers to win the NBA championship. Moses Malone's prediction of 4-5-4 was close. The city had 2 championships in 3 years. The Eagles went to the Super Bowl after the 1980 season, losing to the Raiders, but just reaching the big game was an achievement. Veterans Stadium, that concrete multi-purpose facility, was home to both the Eagles and the Phillies. The turf was terrible. The sight lines were not great, but it was where Philadelphia sports happened. Pittsburgh had the Steelers, who had won 4 Super Bowls in the 1970s. The dynasty was ending, but the pride remained. Three Rivers Stadium hosted both the Steelers and Pirates. The Pirates won the World Series in 1979 with the We Are Family team, and that spirit carried into the early 1980s. High school football in Pennsylvania was more than a sport. Friday nights in the fall meant entire towns shutting down to watch the local team. The rivalries were intense and generations old. Western Pennsylvania had produced more NFL players than anywhere else in America. Names like Joe Montana, Dan Marino, Joe Namath, and Johnny Unitas come to mind. Football was in the culture, and Friday night games were community events where everyone gathered. Music in Pennsylvania reflected both local pride and national trends. Hall & Oates from Philadelphia became one of the biggest acts of the decade. Private Eyes, I Can't Go For That, and Maneater dominated the radio. Their blue-eyed soul sound was distinctly Philadelphian. The Hooters emerged from the Philadelphia scene with And We Danced and Day by Day. Philadelphia maintained its soul music tradition. The sound of Philadelphia had defined the 1970s, and artists like Teddy Pendergrass, though his career was altered by a 1982 car accident, remained beloved. Pittsburgh had its own scene. Donnie Iris, with Aaliyah and the Clarks, were building a following. The college radio stations at Penn State and other universities were playing alternative music before the term was common. MTV changed how Pennsylvania teenagers experienced music. Suddenly, you could see the artists. Music videos became as important as the songs themselves. Watching MTV after school was a ritual. The channel played constantly, and knowing the latest videos was social currency. Shopping in Pennsylvania meant malls, and malls were at their peak. The King of Prussia Mall outside Philadelphia was one of the largest in America. It had everything. Department stores like Strawbridge and Clothier, Wanamaker's, and JCPenney anchored the complex. Smaller stores filled the corridors. The food court was where teenagers gathered. Century 3 Mall, south of Pittsburgh, served the same function for that region. Monroeville Mall, famous as the setting for Dawn of the Dead, was a suburban destination. These malls were climate-controlled escapes from Pennsylvania's harsh winters and humid summers. Wawa was expanding across eastern Pennsylvania. These convenience stores became community institutions. Getting a hoagie at Wawa was routine. The stores were clean, well-stocked, and open long hours. In western Pennsylvania, Sheetz served the same function, and the Wawa versus Sheetz debate was already forming. Department stores still mattered. Gimbel's was fading, but Strawbridge's and Wanamaker's remained destinations. The Wanamaker building in Center City, Philadelphia, with its giant organ and eagle statue, was a landmark. Going there for Christmas shopping was a tradition. Food in Pennsylvania was regional and proud. The cheesesteak was Philadelphia's contribution to American cuisine. Pat's and Geno's faced each other at 9th and Passyunk, and the rivalry was real. Ordering properly, knowing to say wit or wit out for onions, was essential. Soft pretzels from street vendors were everywhere in Philadelphia, often eaten with yellow mustard. Hoagies were serious business. Italian hoagies with capicola, salami, and provolone were lunch. Every neighborhood had its preferred hoagie shop. Tasty cakes were the local snack. Butterscotch crimpets, chocolate juniors, and candy cakes filled lunch boxes and convenience store shelves. They tasted better than national brands, or at least Pennsylvanians thought so. Pittsburgh had its own food identity. Primanti brothers put coleslaw and French fries on sandwiches, and that was normal there. Pierogies reflected the Eastern European heritage of steelworker families. Kielbasa and sauerkraut were everyday foods. Central Pennsylvania contributed shoofly pie, scrapple, and other Pennsylvania Dutch traditions. Whoopie pies were a local treat. The food was hearty, meant to fuel people doing physical work. Daily life in Pennsylvania in the 1980s was shaped by the weather. Winters were harsh. Snow measured in feet, not inches. Lake effect snow often hammered Erie and the northwestern corner of the state. Schools closed, but not as often as kids hoped. Pennsylvanians were expected to deal with winter. Cars had to be scraped and warmed up on cold mornings. Block heaters were common, and snow tires or chains were necessary. The sight of road crews spreading cinders on icy roads was a constant from November through March. Summers brought humidity that made the air feel thick. Air conditioning was spreading, but it was not yet universal. Many homes relied on window units and bedrooms only. Sitting on the stoop in the evening, hoping for a breeze, was how people survived August heat. The state fairs and carnivals that traveled through towns provided summer entertainment. The aftermath of 3 Mile Island hung over Pennsylvania in the early 1980s. The 1979 nuclear accident near Harrisburg terrified the region. Although experts debated the actual health effects, the psychological impact was real. People living near the plant worried about what they had been exposed to. Trust in authorities who had initially downplayed the crisis was damaged. The incident became a symbol of technological danger and influenced how Pennsylvanians viewed nuclear power. Family life centered on traditions. Sunday dinners after church brought extended families together. Italian families in South Philadelphia, Polish families in Pittsburgh, Irish families everywhere maintained customs brought by immigrant grandparents. The Catholic Church remained powerful, with parish identity mattering as much as neighborhood identity. Telling someone what parish you were from told them everything about your background. High school reunions were major events because people often stayed close to where they grew up. Generations lived in the same neighborhoods. Grandparents were nearby, not across the country. This rootedness gave communities stability even as the economy struggled. What defined Pennsylvania in the 1980s was resilience in the face of change. The industrial economy that had built the state was crumbling, but communities held together. People adapted, found new work, and maintained their identities. The decade had its struggles with unemployment and economic uncertainty that touched almost every family. But it also had championship celebrations, Friday night football games, and neighborhoods where everyone knew each other. Pennsylvania in the 1980s was a place of hard work and fierce loyalty. People were proud of where they came from, proud of their sports teams, proud of their local foods and customs. The mills might be closing, but the community spirit survived. For those who lived in Pennsylvania during the 1980s, it was a time of transition. The old certainties were ending, but the values that defined Pennsylvania, including hard work, family loyalty, and community bonds, remained strong. The state was changing, but its character endured. For those with memories of this remarkable era in the Keystone State, there is always more history to explore.